Hey everybody, this is Max with D.C. Watches, and today I wanted to bring you a review of probably my personal favorite watch in my collection. It is my Omega Seamaster from the late 90s, early 2000s, reference 2531.80.00. So I suppose right now we can get into the intro and the unboxing, and then we'll get right into the review. Alright, so now it's time for my favorite part, I guess, is the mock unboxing. So here we have the kind of classic big white 1990s, early 2000s Omega box. Open this thing up, try not to bump my camera. And we have just the most disgusting red leather box. These things age like cheese on a warm day. Not particularly well, I would say. The leather card wallet as well, which, as you can see, just didn't age really at all well. We have the Omega owner's manual, which is printed in every language, living and dead. More schmata from the box. Kind of the operating instructions for the watch. Don't know why you would ever need a book this thick to learn how to operate a three-hand watch, but I suppose that is kind of the Omega way, right? In general. And then we do have the kind of tried and true red leather box with the Omega emblem on it. Just gonna scoot this out. You can see there's just more degradation of the box over time. Kind of typical of Omega boxes from this era. As you can see, the leather hasn't held up fantastically, though it's definitely better than some other Omega cases that I've had and some other Omega cases that I've seen, both in person and on the internet. So you have kind of this really, really gorgeous Omega watches logo with the Swiss made since 1848 on it. That's probably my favorite part about the box. When we open it up, I have no idea if this is the original box. My guess is probably not, but I have no way of really telling. It is at least period correct. And you open the box and you have the watch. So without further ado, let's get into the review. All right, so I suppose the best place to start is probably with the dimensions. So this is, again, the Omega Seamaster Professional 300 meter reference 2531.80. So the width of this case is going to be 41 millimeters. It has a thickness, a wonderful thickness for kind of a contemporary dive watch at 11.8 millimeters. That has a lot to do with the movement inside, which we'll talk about later. The leg width is 20 millimeters, which is fantastic, matches the Speedmaster. They share a lot of straps. And the lug-to-lug on the head of this watch is 47 millimeters. However, with the ends of the bracelet being male end lengths, it truly extends to, I had 52.2 millimeters with the end lengths. So this watch is stainless steel. It has a stainless steel head and a stainless steel bracelet. The bracelet is this really, really wonderful 5-link design, which drapes over the wrist quite well, I would say. Not nearly as well as the reference 1479 Omega bracelet that I have on my Speedmaster, but still quite well. The bracelet does not taper any kind of measurable amount down to this really, really nice clasp. This is a double push button clasp. All of it is milled, none of it is stamped, with a diver's extension here, and that's a true diver's extension on that one. Coming back up to the head of the watch, we can see that there's two crowns, one at the 3 o'clock and one at the 10 o'clock. The 10 o'clock crown is the helium escape valve. The 3 o'clock crown is the one that controls the movement, both of which are signed by Omega, with the Omega logo right there, and another one on the helium escape valve. Now, the bezel on this watch is 120 click unidirectional bezel. This is an aluminum bezel insert, and it is a count up timer or dive time bezel. There is a GMT version. That version comes with a traditional GMT bezel. The dial on this watch is a very interesting blue. And you can see it has the wave pattern, but really only in some lights. There it could be pretty much a flat blue dial, but you know, once you get any shadow on it, the wave pattern on the dial really pops. One thing that a lot of people knock this watch for is that all the text on the dial is printed, as are the hour markers and the indices, as well as a printed frame around the date window at 3. The logo is printed, and so is the text underneath it. The Seamaster Professional Chronometer, 300 meters, 1,000 feet. That, of course, being the depth rating for this watch. So the indices of this watch have superluminova on it, and despite being a watch from the 1990s, they actually shine quite bright. There's also superluminova on the skeletonized hands, and on the lume pipette 12 is also superluminova. We also have a signed clasp. This is Omega Seamaster Professional, and a signed case back with the hippocampus and kind of mirroring the wave pattern on the dial there, which is one of my favorite parts about this watch, if I'm going to be completely honest. And then the sapphire on this watch is AR coated. It's a slightly domed sapphire. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but I actually have 2 scratches in my AR coating. There's one right there at about 6. There's another one right here where the second hand is passing under. So those are scratches in the AR coating, and you can obviously tell that this bezel has seen better days. It is scratched to anything, but it's all part of the character of this watch and many of the reasons I love it. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about the movement of this watch and kind of the history of how it's become such a cult classic in the Omega community. So if you guys have seen my other reviews, the Nomos, Minimatic, and the Omega Speedmaster Professional, this movement isn't really of the same caliber, pun intended, I suppose, but it is a very nice movement nonetheless. It is a chronometer certified Omega caliber 1120, which is based on the ETA 2892-A2, I believe. Omega did make some very interesting changes to this movement. I believe they added 2 jewels to help with the winding. Now, one of the things that I love about this movement, and one of the reasons I chose this watch, is because the ETA movement is considerably slimmer than the coaxial movement, which was introduced in, I believe, about 2006 from Omega. So this watch actually wears much slimmer. It's much closer to a dress watch than it would be to any kind of traditional sport watch. This watch has the movement inside has a 44-hour power reserve. It beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour, which is honestly not my preference. I personally prefer slower beat rates. That's just kind of a weird quirk about me as a collector. I like seeing the secondhand stutter. I don't really know why, but it's very pleasing to me. And of course, this movement is hackable and hand winding. Another kind of interesting section about this watch is the lore, why it's kind of become such a classic with Omega. This piece was originally introduced in 1993, and in 1995, it made its silver screen debut with Pierce Brosnan's GoldenEye, the James Bond film. He did originally start out with the 2540-180, which was the quartz iteration of this watch, which was later upgraded, I guess. I don't know. The quartz version is also very cool, but was later changed to a 2530-180, which is the automatic movement. Prior to 1997, all of the watches on the dials and the hands had tritium lume, so this is a post-1997 piece, and this particular reference was eventually discontinued in 2006 in favor of the reference 2220.80, and that's where they introduced at 6 o'clock the red Seamaster text and also the coaxial escapement. So this is towards the end, or towards the beginning of the superluminova references. I believe this is about a 1998, 1999, though I'm not 100% sure. And now I'd kind of like to talk about, now that I've kind of run through why this watch is a cult classic and the dimensions of this watch, I would like to talk about why I love my watch in particular. So, like many on the internet have pointed out, this watch is becoming kind of a sleeper hit. Prices are starting to increase kind of commensurate with all watches, but I honestly think that this watch is really, really underappreciated in the history of contemporary sport watches. And a lot of the reasons for that are how well this watches seem to age, and how each reference or each serial number kind of seems to age a lot differently. Of course, you don't really have the tropical dial like you would see on a vintage Rolex, or similar tritium aging that you would see on my Speedmaster, because this is obviously superluminova. But the original color of this dial and bezel was a much, much, much darker blue, and it's kind of faded to this almost pastel blue, like a sky blue, and I think it's a very, very attractive look. It's not one that's really matched by any contemporary Omega, or really any contemporary watch that I've seen. In addition, the end of the seconds hand used to be red. When this watch was originally released, the end of the seconds hand past the lume pip was red. But this is faded to white, and I personally prefer that because I feel like it matches the rest of the watch much better. A lot of people don't like that, obviously, because it's not true to the originality of the watch necessarily, but I kind of prefer it because I think it provides a more contiguous look. Everything seems to be just a bit more well-fitting, with the end of the second hand kind of bleached by the sun, especially with the dial and with the bezel appearing so much lighter than they were originally. Originally, it was a much, much darker blue, kind of a navy setting, and this is really, really faded to a almost kind of periwinkle, I guess. I'm really not sure, but I really enjoy the way that it looks, especially when compared to the stark white of the lume and the indices and the printing on the dial. I also really, really love this bezel. Beyond just the aging of the aluminum bezel insert, I like that it's beat up. I like that there are scratches on it. None of the scratches are mine. Well, maybe some of them are, but none of the more significant ones are mine, and it kind of shows that the watch lived a life before I got it, and I get to kind of experience another section of the watch's existence with it. This watch was obviously worn quite well. I don't think you would see that kind of aging, that kind of gray-blue aging, if it wasn't a well-worn and well-loved watch, especially with the scratch and the sapphire coating. I mean, the stories this thing must be able to tell. I just love this watch. I could wax poetic about this watch and the way that it looks all day. I'm going to try to intercut a lot of pictures to kind of show this watch in better light, to kind of better encapsulate why the things about this watch that I think are so attractive looking. There isn't a whole lot that I don't like about this watch. I've had some bad experiences as an owner of this watch, but nothing about that has to do with the watch itself. Those are all kind of experiences that we have with watches as we wear them. That I'm going to put in a different video, probably sometime later this week. I'm also thinking about starting to make more videos every week, so let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in. I also love the fact that this has superluminova and a lot of it. A lot of people complain that the skeletonized hands aren't as bright as the sword arrow hands, which is probably fair in the grand scheme of things, but there is still a lot of lume on this watch. I'll try to get you guys a lume shot at the end of this video, just to kind of show you how bright this is, but it is, not a joke, brighter than my Seiko, brighter than my Seiko SKX. It is a lot of lume. It's very well applied. This watch is very, very legible and low and no light situations, and the lume actually lasts a good bit of time. I film on my iPhone, so I'm not going to be able to give a great lume video to show how it ages, but it is it is a sufficient amount of lume. The only things I don't really love about this watch are the bracelet and the clasp. And I know I'm probably going to get a little bit of flack for that, because at the time, Omega was competing with Rolex heavily. Not that they don't now, but in a way where they were really vying for kind of top spot in consumer luxury. And this clasp at the time was so far ahead of what Rolex was offering. Rolex was still offering their stamped clasp, with a stamped diver's extension that a lot of people, you know, they think it's, you know, you hear them talk about it and you think they're talking about an SKX bracelet that they accidentally left outside in the rain for 2 months. I actually like those bracelets from Rolex, but this is nevertheless a much more significant clasp with everything having been machined, and instead of having the flip lock, having the double deployant, and also having a diver's extension as part of the bracelet, which Rolex had, but it wasn't really a true diver's extension. That was stamped metal. This is machined. But I don't like that there are no micro adjustments. There's literally not a single micro adjustment. They do have these half links, and there are half links included with the bracelet, but I've never really been able to get a wonderful fit from it. It's always been just a little bit loose on me, and I do have smaller wrists, but I think it would be quite difficult for really anybody to get a perfect fit on this watch. Now, it doesn't move around a ton. I just prefer my watches a little bit tighter than that. I don't like it when they wiggle around. I like a truly tight-fitting watch. Having said that, on wrist, the bracelet does feel fantastic, and there's really nothing wrong with it. It's just personal preference on some things. But this watch has kept a wonderful time for me. I've owned this watch for 2 years in August, I want to say. So I'll talk a little bit more in a later video about kind of my experience over 2 years of ownership with this watch. But insofar as the review as a whole goes, I know I said that the Omega Speedmaster is probably the best everyday watch, but I think that this is the best entry luxury watch. I think if you're going for a first luxury watch, a young guy or gal, the 36 millimeters is wonderful as well. I think this is a fantastic first luxury watch. I would say you get Rolex level quality. You get top brand level quality paying significantly less. I don't know what these are trading for now, but I got mine for well under $2,000 when I first bought it. But this is just an absolutely wonderful watch, and one that I would recommend wholeheartedly to anybody. It really is a very accessible luxury piece, and that's one of the reasons that I love it so much. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Max from DC Watches. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And let me know if you guys would like to see any other kinds of videos. I'm definitely going to do kind of an ownership review of a couple pieces I have, and I have a fun video planned for next Sunday with my Seiko SKX, where I'm gonna kind of add a modification to it if I get all the parts in the mail this week. All right, guys, thanks so much. I'll see you next time. This has been Max with DC Watches.